What's up, guys? This is Nate. I'm back in your feed, and if you're brand new to the show, welcome. If you're an old school subscriber to the Love-U-Mentary, welcome back. I'm so excited to bring to you the Growth Marriage Podcast. It's a little bit of a twist on the Love-U-Mentary that I've done for the last 6 years, and I'm really excited to tell you what you can expect going forward. But first, I want to tell you an important story. For those of you who might be tuning into the first time or who haven't heard my voice for a while, which is probably everybody, I want to tell you a little bit about why this podcast is important for you to be listening to. So I want to really quickly tell you my story and how the information that I'm going to share with you completely transformed my life. So if you rewind, 20 years, I was raised in a family where growing up and having a family of my own was an expectation. It was actually something I was taught and trained to do from a very young age. And I actually looked forward to it. I was really excited for the day where I would marry the love of my life. I wanted to be the kind of husband that lit my wife up in a good way. I wanted her to feel excited to be married to me. I wanted her to go out with her friends and brag about what an amazing husband I was. And that's because when I was a kid, I remember seeing these couples. And every so often there would be this couple who had a specific kind of just magic in their relationship. You'd walk into their home and you would feel at peace and you'd feel happy, and I would watch them interact with each other, and they were playful and they were kind and sweet, and it looked like they really enjoyed being married to each other. As opposed to when I went into other homes, and from time to time I'd bump into a couple where you could tell there was tension, there was conflict. They were kind of just mutually tolerating each other until their kids would grow up and leave the house, and it felt kind of gross to be in their house. And I made this mental note and I said, when I grow up and get married, I want to have the kind of home where people feel welcome and happy because of the type of relationship I have with my wife. I want to have that type of extraordinary relationship, the rare kind of relationship that other people look at and they say, what are you doing? How do we get a relationship like that? So that was my mission. And when I got into my 20s, I was always fascinated with relationships because of this desire. And I ended up starting a website called Unsolicited Dating Advice, where I would write down all of the lessons that I learned from going on the many, many dates that I went on. And then in college, I got on the newspaper staff and I had a relationship advice column. And I still to this day remember first time a student that I didn't know approached me and said, "Are you Nate?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, "I read your article in the newspaper and I cut it out and I hung it up on my bathroom mirror, and it was so good. It made me cry and really think about who I wanted to be, and I just wanted to say thank you." And this light bulb went off and I'm like, man, this is something I really, really enjoy. So fast forward into my mid-20s, and I had friends that were getting married and family members that were getting married, and people were starting to put pressure on me hey, is this something you're gonna do soon? You're getting close to your 30s. Are you gonna settle down? And the truth is, I wanted to. I really, really wanted to. I was going on lots of dates, and every time I'd get into a relationship, I was really good at that first couple of weeks or couple of months of the relationship, but as soon as things got hard, I didn't know what to do, and things would just fall through the cracks. I would run away, I would shut down, I would pull back, and I would end the relationship. And I was just caught in this nasty habit. And I knew if I wanted to have the type of relationship I wanted, I needed to learn some relationship skills. So I had this crazy idea. I thought to myself, what would happen if I spent some time interviewing the couples that I remember from my youth, the type of couples that had that magic kind of relationship? I wonder if I talked to enough of them, if I could figure out what they were doing differently than everybody else that made their relationship so amazing. So I did something risky. I think I was 27 or 28, living in Orlando, Florida, and I had a rough day at work one day and realized this light bulb went off, and I'm like, you know what? I've got enough savings saved up. I'm just gonna quit and I'm gonna go find answers to this question. It's bothering me that much. So I quit my job. I sold everything that I owned, and then whatever I had left that fit inside my Mini Cooper, I took with me, and I went on this crazy journey to figure out the key to unlocking truly epic, lasting love. And it was insane. I ended up doing a bunch of interviews and then met up with this girl named Melissa, and she and I did a Kickstarter and raised a bunch of money to travel all over the country. We interviewed couples from every walk of life that you can think of. We interviewed gay couples and straight couples and religious couples and non-religious couples and people who'd been in arranged marriages, people who were really rich, people who were really poor. It was unbelievable, the types of stories that we heard and the type of experiences we had. And those interviews unlocked an opportunity to start meeting with experts. People started listening to the conversations that we were having, and they said, hey, you should talk to so-and-so, you should talk to so-and-so. And so we got to sit down and interview some of the top professors and authors and researchers and experts on marriage and love in the entire world. Like, I got to sit down with the author Gary Chapman, the author of the 5 Love Languages, and I got to sit down with John and Julie Gottman, and they're like the godparents of marriage research, and I got to interview them, and the list goes on and on and on. And all of these things started to click in my brain, and I'm like, oh man, I'm not doing that, and I could be doing this, and I should be doing that better. I felt like I was becoming an expert myself. And then something amazing happened. I connected with a really good friend of mine who I had feelings for off and on for quite a while, and circumstances aligned perfectly so that we could fall in love. And we did, and we started dating, and then we got engaged, and I was so excited about the way that this relationship was headed. I was like, yes, it's finally working. I finally cracked the code. I got it figured out. And then some stuff came up in the relationship, and we had a really hard time navigating it, and it was really difficult. And I remember at one point we were getting ready to send out invitations to our wedding, and we had them all printed out, and we were getting ready to stuff envelopes and ship them out. And I looked at my fiance, and I just saw a sense of dread on her face, worry, concern. And I looked at her and said, look, are you okay? And she was like, no. And I said, would you feel better if we moved back our wedding date? And she said, yeah, actually, I think I could use a little bit more time to figure out if this is like what we want. And I said, that's no problem. So we moved back the wedding date, and then we moved it back again. And finally things came to a point where I just realized, whether it was the timing or the circumstances, for whatever reason, things were just not working out. They were much, much harder than they should be. And to this day, I still remember the absolute crushing feeling that I felt when I ended that relationship. I wanted to die. I had never felt so sad, depressed, lonely, crushed in my entire life. I remember walking in the door and just weeping and going down to my bedroom and laying in bed for days. I remember at one point I finally convinced myself to go bathe, and I turned on the shower and I just laid down in the bottom of the shower in the fetal position, and I just wept and just had snot running down my face and the hot water running over my naked body, and I just laid there for like an hour, just miserable. And the thoughts I was thinking was like, one, how crappy it felt to lose the person I loved most in the world and have this not work out. And two, I was supposed to be a marriage expert. I was supposed to be the guy who had all I don't know anybody, any single guy that had done more work to prepare for marriage than me. And I still couldn't make it work. Was there something wrong with me? Was I broken? Like, what happened to make this relationship not work out? What was it about me that made it fail? And I felt horrible. I was absolutely destroyed for a long time. Eventually, I crawled myself out of this pit and I talked myself into trying again. I realized that there was something that I had learned along the way that I wasn't doing. And there was this pattern that I discovered, and this is the question I always get when people hear about my story. They say, well, what did you learn on your journey? Like, what did you learn talking to all these couples and all these experts? And I realized that there were lots of little tidbits of information, but there's one general principle that I learned that I wasn't putting into practice. And the idea behind it is that the very best couples, the happiest couples, the most fulfilled couples in the world, they all do this thing, and many of them do it without even realize it. But they live their life in accordance with what I would call the growth ecosystem. And the idea behind the growth ecosystem is that, let's make an analogy. So if you plant a flower, you can scream at the flower to grow, you can try and convince it to grow, you can try and bribe it to grow, but a seed will only grow into a flower if you put it in the right ecosystem. And then it doesn't really matter what you do. As long as it's in the right ecosystem, it has no choice but to grow. The same is true with humans. Humans are amazing beings, and most of the time, if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling like you're not making progress, if you're feeling like you're not where you want to be, It has more to do with the ecosystem that you're in, the surroundings that you've put yourself in, than it does with your desires. Like if you put a seed in a pot of really rich, fertile soil and you water it and you give it sunlight, it'll grow. That's just the way it works. And there's a recipe, there's an ecosystem just like that of a plant that makes people grow and become better, and it unlocks their potential. And the couples that I talk to the most, the couples that I talked to that had the most incredible relationships had this specific ecosystem in place that facilitated their closeness, their playfulness, their growth, their honesty, their communication, their sexual chemistry. It made every single aspect of their relationship incredible as often as it could be incredible. They all still experienced trials and struggles, but the speed with which they overcame those struggles and trials was so much faster than the couples that struggled and that were having a really hard time in their marriage. And that growth ecosystem is what I started to implement after I kind of started reflecting on my failed engagement. I was like, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And finally something clicked. And this growth ecosystem is what clicked. And after I recovered from that breakup, I met my wife that I have now, and I focused on the growth ecosystem. And it is insane how quickly that relationship progressed and how amazing our relationship has been. And I can honestly say now, looking at my marriage, that I have the type of marriage that I dreamed of having when I was a kid. I believe that my wife and I have that special relationship that other people look at and they go, how do you guys do it? I want that. And so over these next couple of episodes, I want to share with you how to unlock the potential of the growth ecosystem inside your marriage so that you have the most epic and the most incredible relationship possible. And the greatest thing about this is that if you just put these principles into place, you have no choice but to have an amazing relationship. It happens automatically. It's not even something you have to think about. If you're used to committing to a goal and then like white knuckling it and gritting your teeth and just saying like, oh, I'm gonna be better, I'm gonna be better, I'm gonna be better. And then a couple of weeks go by and then you find yourself falling out of your good habits or falling short of the expectations you set for yourself. It's because you didn't have the ecosystem in place. You had the right intention and the right desire. You might have felt motivated, but you lacked the right ecosystem that would facilitate your growth and your progression. So I'm super, super excited. If you're feeling like you're in a place where you want to take your relationship to the next level, if you're feeling like you're in a place where you're struggling and you need to get back into a place where you feel comfortable and you're not just in survival mode, this growth ecosystem is going to unlock some insanely amazing things for you. And I'm really, really excited to share it with you. So the next couple episodes, that's what I'm going to cover. If you guys have questions, I would love to hear about it. Just shoot me an email at nate@growthmarriage.com. Always love hearing from you guys. Thanks for tuning in. I'm really excited for the direction of this podcast, and I hope you share it with your friends.